We have amazing panelists and a very exciting topic to cover. And thank you all who came here in this quite early morning to listen to the insights from our speakers. We will be speaking about cybersecurity in the age of agentic AI. Agentic AI are autonomously operating models that can take initiative and make their own decisions without much of external direction. And right now, for example, Cloud by Anthropic is one of the most known models. It also got quite famous in recent days because a Chinese-backed hacker group used Cloud code to automate a cyber espionage campaign. Attackers jailbroke Cloud by breaking the malicious task into many small and seemingly harmless parts. And according to Anthropic, 80 to 90% of the hacking work was done autonomously by artificial intelligence. The operation targeted 30 global organizations, including tech companies, chemical manufacturers, and government agencies, also financial institutions. So we see that for long, autonomous AI was only a promise. Now we see its adoption. And this is changing how governments, businesses, and societies operate and how they will operate in the future. But this efficiency comes at the expense of increased vulnerability. And these promises and perils will be addressed today by the most wonderful speakers who have been already introduced, but please also give me the honor because they deserve to be introduced in more detail. So the first speakers we have on the panel is Yeholashet Megersa-Ayano, Director at the Computer Vision Research at Ethiopian Artificial Intelligence Institute, and he will be representing the technology community and angle on our panel, so thank you very much for coming. We have Gilbert Nyandeje, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of the Africa Cyber Defense Forum in Kenya. Welcome, Gilbert, who will be adding both the policy and entrepreneurial angle to our conversation. Then it's my great honor to welcome Ambassador Latha Reddy, co-chairman of the Global Commission on Stability in Cyberspace from India. Welcome, Ambassador. Ambassador Latha Reddy has been in the Foreign Service for 36 years. She's been involved in creating the cyber policy agenda for India and served in 2 global commissions, one on internet governments and the second one on cyber stability. And last but not least with us is Anna Maria Collard, Senior Vice President of Content Strategy at KnowBe4 in South Africa. Anna is cybersecurity entrepreneur, cyber psychologist, researcher in cognitive resilience and digital mindfulness, veteran in human factor security, and co-founder of Mido Cyber Academy, establishing a cyber helpline for South African citizens. So we have the best speakers to address this very complex topic. And just to introduce a bit how this panel will proceed, we will attempt for a good flow. We will start with the more technical angle than used to safeguards across different sectors, how agentic AI is being used, and what does it mean for the security, and specifically cybersecurity of these sectors. And then we will cover the governance angle, so how to establish global norms. As this is Cape Town conversation, and the spirit is dialogue and influencing the agenda, we'll make everything we can to make it a conversation. So prepare your questions. We'll be definitely opening the floor to your questions, and you will be sharing your points, maybe short commentaries, but especially questions for our panelists in the second half of this panel. So again, thank you very much, everyone who has joined us this morning. And let me start with the first speaker, Yeholashet, and other panelists, feel free to join the conversation and share your insights as well. So what is the promise of agentic AI and the new vulnerabilities it creates? What does this mean for cybersecurity, especially when we have this layer of digital in public infrastructure?
Okay, thank you, Pavalina, and I would like to say also thank you for the conversation organizers for inviting me on this exciting conversation. Just before addressing your question, let me give some context about agentic AIs. So agentic AIs are nothing but they are AI systems that not only process information, rather they autonomously plan, act, collaborate with other AI system, and also adopt based on a feedback from the digital ecosystem. So having said that, the Agentic AI has three main components. The first one is the reasoning part, which is mostly the large language models or LLMs. It has like a tool system, and the third one is the memory system. So this LLM course generates the strategic reasoning of the Agentic AI, and the tool systems will execute scripts, perform API calls, and even interacts with other platforms. So the memory system actually is a vector database that stores the evolving nature, the evolving knowledge, and also task status. Good. So having these three components, let's take some hypothetical examples how these agentic AI workflows happen. So having, for example, a hypothetical example which we want to optimize the workflow of a given hospital. So we have a goal of having a goal of reducing wait times and also optimizing the staff schedule. Then these AI agents will take an input or perceive the staff schedules, the patient admissions, and treatment logs. Having this input or perception, the LLMs, which is the core component, will carry out the reasoning, or it produces the plans and actions. So the second component of the agentic AI, which is the memory interface, will retrieve the context, histories, and also knowledge so that a proper tool is selected. Then these tool sets execute the chosen operations using those tools, and also may carry also API calls, so that it turns the reasoning of the LLM into real-world actions. So finally, it acts on environment, or it generates the intended result, like changing the hospital roster, or coming up with optimized schedule. So in these processes, we expose to AI agents our database, other tools, so that if proper guardrails are not implemented, this operation may expose patients' information and also staff personal data. So these are one of the vulnerabilities that Agentic AI brings on the cybersecurity arena. So having said that, let's see some of the vulnerabilities that the existing cybersecurities may not address the challenges that we may face because of these agentic AIs. The first thing is that the decision loops of these agentic AI autonomously chain operations, as I've said earlier, across databases, API calls, and infrastructure. This creates vulnerabilities, but the existing cybersecurity framework assumes static threat models and also clearly defined user actions. So this agentic AI being operating on real time with like millions of instructions per second may result or may expose some informations which are to be kept confidentially. So this is one of the challenges. The second challenge that we may face because of this agentic AI is that as it triggers complex sequence of operations, but the existing cybersecurity frameworks are also mainly focuses on perimeter security and endpoint or device protections. But the agentic AI could use the legitimate API calls for mass scrapping, which indirectly exposes the sensitive internal endpoints. So having the existing cybersecurity framework, which mainly focuses on perimeter security or endpoint protection, may not capture the vulnerabilities that may be caused by the API mass scrapping, which indirectly exposes the sensitive endpoints inside the network. So the other most important challenge that we may face because of this agentic AI is the cascading failure in digital public infrastructure. What does it mean? So we may have an interconnected AI agents which work collaboratively to accomplish a given goal, but a single failure can rapidly break down all the systems. So that is the problem of that's a problem that we have when we have a collaborative agentic AI working in digital public infrastructure. For example, if you take one failure of an agent which actually do the digital ID authentication, if that agent fails or if it is poisoned by some attacks, then it may classify a citizen as unverified. That's a problem. And then it may result the payment system for that particular person not to be carried out or stop payments. Even it may cause the hospital intake agents like to reject patients. So the challenge will cascade it and will poison the agents that are working collaboratively. Though this is one of the issues that we may face because of these agentic AIs. Yeah, back to you, Lavina.
Thank you very much. And yeah, you mentioned healthcare, and healthcare is very interesting case study for cybersecurity and the use of AI, because like healthcare is known for opening its like data and like connecting the devices a lot in the past years and digitizing a lot. And this made it very vulnerable as a sector. And at the same time, now with the AI engines, we see how even short disruption in healthcare causes massive impacts to patients who are in need of the care. Well, there may be some other examples across critical sectors. We have manufacturing, we have electricity, water facilities, and SATA, transportation, communications. So maybe other panelists, let's start with you, Gilbert. What are maybe some other use cases of agentic AI, and then proceed to the safeguards? How can we make these systems more secure?
Thanks, Pavlina, and of course the ORF team and my fellow colleagues for the panel. I think we're living in an interesting world. I mean, everybody is now interacting with AI, right? I mean, even everybody has ChatGPTs and all this, but people don't know the risk that we basically are finding ourselves now when you talk about agentic AI. As Ayano has indicated, now you have autonomous systems. The challenge you face here is where you have systems that basically are able to test tasks that basically, you have no control of. The question now comes in, the big risk is, who takes responsibility when AI agent goes rogue? Basically we find ourselves in a situation where we're in this hybrid human AI world where who is responsible? Now that becomes a big problem that most of the risk frameworks we have today did not preempt that. And that's basically where we found ourselves in a very, very big challenge, where we have to now rethink even some of our safeguards we have in security, because as you said, for example, security at the moment, we look at security, for example, if you talk about something like vulnerability management, you look at it from an angle of static software, for example, endpoint vulnerability. But now you are now facing a situation where we have risks like, for example, model poisoning, where you could have some of these models have backdoored, it doesn't change its operation. However, basically within an embedded, already you have this malicious, execution. The model works properly as it is, but it has a malicious embedded code in it. And even if you look at, if a little bit technicality in terms of, let's say, source code review, how are you cannot be able to detect that because it's basically already a poisoned model from the angle of even the supply chain. We are now even going to find ourselves from the supply chain angle where, let's say, for example, you talk of open source models. And when some of these, I think yesterday when we were in the session, someone was talking about some of their open sourced AI models. Now, when you have these open source AI models and they end up being backdoored, how will you tell? And you end up, training them on your data within your organization. Before you know it, the entire system has gone rogue. You've exposed it to healthcare, right? That becomes a challenge. And this is what brings us now, what are the key safeguards we need to put in place? I will classify them into 3 levels. One is the technical safeguards. We also need to have operational safeguards. Then the last comes on regulatory. Let me start first on the technical safeguards. The technical safeguards, basically, you need to look at it from the angle of least privilege, where, for example, you need to basically be assured that some of these agents are basically separated from, let's say, the production environment, or where you also ensure that, for example, let's say you have an agent that deals with, let's say, I give a typical example, let's say, in energy sector. You can have an AI agent, let's say energy AI agent, that basically automates or, let's say, load shedding, right, tasks. So it understands the load shedding in terms of, for example, patterns. But at the last stage, you at least need to ensure that at least there's a sign-off by an operator. Because if you don't do that, it can end up basically causing an entire, the agent has basically caused an entire disruption of the entire critical infrastructure, let's say, for example, in the entire country, just because the AI agent went rogue. So that's basically could be some of the safeguards you use. The other level of safeguard could be on the angle of, let's say, monitoring and logging and monitoring. We need to basically be able to also have a capability to monitor the functionalities or the functions of some of these agents, so that at least we are able to not only focus on the traditional endpoint angle of, let's say, malware infection, but we also look at what exactly are the tasks, or rather basically some of the operations of these models. Because it can be where basically the malicious operations are executed. This will be very, very important. Then the other angle now also calls upon us to also start thinking around an issue of sandboxing. I'm sure you might have heard of an idea of digital twins, where we say, okay, fine, can we basically, even before we deploy some of these agents, can we have digital twins that we're able to do stress testing on how some of these models are going to behave when they're in real environment. So I think those would be very, very important on the technical safeguards. When it comes to the operational safeguards, is things like, for example, incident response. How many people, for example, are in banking sector? When you talk about your incident response playbooks, it is time to rethink your incident response playbooks. I remember a gentleman was talking about their use case, for example, in Absa Bank, on how they are basically using some of the AI models to be able to maybe, let's say, ensure financial inclusion. But this is the point where even the banking sector, as you bring on this new model, you need to think around your incident response playbooks. Are you basically having proper policies, for example, when, for example, around poisoned, for example, models? Is it there? Is it part of your incident response playbooks? Because if it is not there, then it means your existing incident response playbooks has not basically responded to the reality of the new risk you have introduced in the organization. So that's on that angle. The other part, of course, comes around regulatory standards, where, if you look, for example, there's NIST, the NIST AI risk framework. This is basically AI RMF. NIST has come up with a standard that could be used. And this also basically could also call upon where the regulator, and this is the challenge you have, because the things are evolving so fast that the regulator cannot even cope up with. Because, for example, I don't know whether in South Africa today there's any body dealing with AI regulation. I think it might not even exist yet. And you have now already organizations introducing this, where we need to look at it even from the angle, and I think Anna will chime on the aviation sector, where there's the level of test where basically before you even basically, go ahead and implement some of these trauma systems, you need to basically prove, or rather show, a level of test on some of these models. So I think that would be very, very important. We could adopt some of the applications on safety in the aviation industry, and even energy, and even nuclear. There's a lot of regulations that you're required to be able to implement. So I will look at it from those three angles: operational safeguards, regulatory safeguards, and of course, in terms of the technical safeguards. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. And it's very interesting how you hinted already with the technical one on vulnerabilities, and there was very interesting case recently about poisoning or influencing the models from within, and it wasn't even poisoning as such by malicious actors, but actually the model coming from developed in a certain country, as they all are. They are at the end of the time, they may be global, but their norms will be still local. It will show that for code development, depending on which country the user was using it, it introduced more vulnerabilities into the code from certain countries. So we see that even from within, like how much we can trust these systems, that they are not compromised. And you mentioned also AI regulation, and who really likes to regulate is the European Union. And famously, even with the AI Act, when that was in the process, in the final stages, because of large language models and ChatGPT progressing so fast, they had to take back some parts and redo them, right? So the question then is how to make these regulatory frameworks not just advanced, but how to make them like basically technology agnostic, even in the age of AI, because there will be more developments, there will be more models, which and we cannot just like be reopening our frameworks every time. But we have Anna on this panel too, and I would be very excited about your take on what do these applications mean for human factor security, as you being a very prominent expert on this topic, Anna.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here and for having me. It's an honor. So from a human behavior point of view, if you look at traditional workforce management and traditional cybersecurity, the human factor is always that one element that we haven't quite been able to manage, really. It's not that, I really don't like the term the human is the weakest link. I disagree with that, but the human is definitely in the firing line in terms of where the adversaries and the social engineers go and find ways into environments rather than exploiting sophisticated technology. Now, when we look at this from an organizational point of view, we now not only have the human that we need to manage, but we have humans interacting with AI agents. So now we have this hybrid complexity environment that we need to manage, where you have AI agents, two AI agents that then interact with the human. So in security, the enemy of safeguarding is complexity. And this is exactly what we're introducing now. I really want to take up on what Gilbert and you also, Pavlina, you mentioned data poisoning. Now, from a human point of view, again, it's very important, particularly from let's call them the general large language models. If you imagine these AI agents like, let's say, a self-driving car in a very smart, autonomous, smart city, right? So you're sitting in your car, the car is this agent, it makes all the decisions by itself, it reads the street signs, it learns, and it makes the right decisions. Even if that car and that model has been perfectly developed and it has got all the safeguards and the right security built in, if somebody manipulates the car signs, right, then the cars will respond as they should based on the data that they're reading from. And that's exactly what sort of data poisoning does when we look at it, and this is already happening if we look at it from a propaganda point of view or misinformation, is that I think the Turing Institute has identified that Russian actors are poisoning Wikipedia entries, for example. They're creating blog posts that are pro-Kremlin because the AI models are they're taking the information from there, and the scary thing is it doesn't take a lot of this. It only takes 250 papers. That's if you look at the whole internet, that's nothing. 250 documents to change the belief system of a large language model, disregarding how big it is, how many parameters it's got. So if you have 250 blog posts that are pro-Kremlin, your ChatGPT, your personal AI agent will tell you a story that is maybe not in your best interest. So this is another element that when we think about humans, and particularly manipulation of humans and society in general, and how we, especially in a world, as we've heard on the first day, where values are no longer being upheld, how easy it is to manipulate citizens and people and societies through these things. And then that takes me to, me personally, as a mother as well, my biggest issue with a lot of this, apart from the safety and the security, is that these algorithms and these systems are controlled by people who sometimes they're 23-year-old tech bros that don't have the psychological background, right? Or they're people that are very much aligned to, let's just face it, authoritarian systems that don't uphold ethics and democratic values. Now, they are controlling the algorithms. They're controlling the content that we're exposing our children to. They're controlling and let's be honest, those agentic assistants or AI agents that are now companions, that are sold as friends to our children. They are not friends. They're part of the attention economy. Their only motivation is to keep them hooked for as long as possible, not to help them at all. And now we're exposing our societies, our vulnerable members of society, to these tools, to these algorithms that are just programmed to keep them hooked for as long as possible, because it's the attention that they want, not to help them, and using way more manipulative powers, like personalized powers that go beyond what social media is already doing and the harm that social media is doing. So yeah, that's I think, just to wrap it up, like a few days ago at the Digital Sovereignty Summit, President Macron, he much more eloquently said, if you have these algorithms and these systems being controlled by these kind of people, and they use the excuse of free speech and innovation, that's not the case. It's the Wild West, and we have to have regulation in place, because these people will not change their business ethics. They will not make sure that we uphold ethical values and actually look after and prevent the harm that these tools could cause on vulnerable people. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Well deserved. Lata, you've been leading consensus building in 2 global coalitions, both on internet government and cyber stability. So there is a wealth of knowledge you have about building global consensus. So how can it be reached across countries on AI, which we see how world is still across regions failing on it? How can we adopt norms for mitigating potential cybersecurity risks stemming from autonomous AI, especially as any of these norms agreed by governments need to be then adopted not only by states, but also by the private sector and citizens?
Thank you very much. I propose to confine myself to the area of how can a global consensus be reached among government and business stakeholders to adopt norms, regulations, standards to mitigate potential cyber risks stemming from autonomous AI. I think my own experiences in the GCIG, the Global Commission on Internet Governance, that was really an experiment, if you like, and that was a Carl-built commission. And there we came up with multiple norms, because we didn't realize the need to perhaps focus on a few specific norms. The GCSC, on the other hand, the Global Commission on Stability in Cyberspace, went a step further. We actually created 8 norms, specific norms, which were based on principles, regulations, and standards. We also interacted in the GCSC with the GGE and the OEWG, the two UN bodies which were also considering cyber issues at the same time. And again, these norms which we came up with were widely accepted by ASEAN, EU, and India. Similarly, when the UN came up with its 14 norms in the GGE and in other bodies, these were adopted by many countries. Again, the EU, ASEAN, India, and among others. And so, you know, I found that the GCSE was by far, I would say, the more interesting body of work. We had people in industry, we had diplomats, we had government organizations and officials represented, and a lot of big business. And in fact, a lot of our funding came also from industry and other areas. So I would say that both in the UN as well as the GCSE, we were able to create certain norms which have stood the test of time, and we presented it at the Paris Peace Forum. And again, it gained wide acceptance there. We did a lot of advocacy. We interacted with many, many bodies all over the world. And I believe we achieved our goal of creating norms, principles, standards, which stood the test of time. So, you know, while agentic AI is a subject which, you know, is very technical, of course, as we've heard from our colleagues here, but it also has a human cost. And I think that is something which, as Anna said, we need to really keep a hold of, because agentic AI can be misused. You know, we've all seen the outbreak of deep fakes and so on and so forth. So while we balance creating norms and standards, we also need to keep this aspect in mind, the human impact of what we do on agentic AI. And I think those are my remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lotte. Exactly, and I think, you know, what is very exciting about the norms that you've been creating in these two commissions and then also UN norms is, like, they are specific, but they're also high level and they're technology agnostic. And then when you socialize them, they create this normative framework to be then like adopted and translated into the regional and national environments. And this is what makes them so agile for years ahead. And we'll be now opening for the questions from the audience, and I truly hope there are many. I believe we have mics on both sides, so please.
Yeah, may I add? I wanted to add something. I wanted to just add. Can I?
And before your question, we just have intervention from Gilbert, and then right afterwards we will take your question. Thank you very much for waiting.
Thanks, Pablo. I just wanted to just add something on it, just a quick one around what we're dealing with, and this now beyond technicalities, but the realities we're living in, even our, you know, the so-called democratic rights in terms of the society we're living in today. You talk about deepfakes, for example, and I mean, here we have, for example, former President Thabo Mbeki. I mean, if you look at the political process that is changing now, you find yourself in a situation where I predict a situation where we might be basically finding ourselves, our democratic processes get totally interfered with, to a point we have no control, because all this, basically you're having, you know, agents, robots having guns across the digital space. You wake up in the morning and you're surprised where did this information come from? By the time you're trying to, you know, to manage the whole situation, all the entire decision has been changed. And that's basically even brings the issue around, you know, national security. where you have maybe, for example, where you might find countries finding themselves in a situation where the issue around the security of the country itself becomes basically compromised because you have no control or someone driving an agenda, as Anna had said it. And I think this basically puts in a bigger problem, because even when it comes to the norms you talked about, it's very hard for us to get consensus. And the reason it's very hard for us to get consensus, I go, for example, the conventions, you look at, for example, Budapest Convention in cybercrime. It was passed, but basically we have not gotten consensus. We're talking about conventions. The Malabo Convention, which is basically African Convention, has been there since 2014, but only recently 15 countries, I think, ratified it. So the challenge you face when it comes to global norms and conventions, for a long time, the African voice has always been, or Africa Global South, has always been a voice at the sidelines. You know, you pass the norm and say, okay, fine, Africans and India and all this at the Global South, here are the norms. And this becomes a big problem, because you forget that basically this is a very huge part of a population that are users of, now, for example, talk about AI, but if their voices are not involved in the norms and processes, it becomes a big challenge. And if already the global north finding itself difficult, remember when we were having the Paris AI summit, when Vice President J.D. Vance made it very clear that the US is not going to sign that responsible AI usage. So what should we expect? Nobody's basically agreeing in the global north. Then global south is a consumer. So I think this is basically the situation we find ourselves, is we need to have more inclusive voices when it comes to these norms for us to have a way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. And being involved in negotiations both on international cybersecurity and then cybercrime and the consensus-based convention, which is now new at the United Nations against cybercrime, I believe it's definitely felt that multilateralism changes, and you cannot put forward any new norms without having cross-regional agreement. So I think the times when a group of countries decided something and then kind of pushed it on others is definitely over, and we need to cooperate with more ambitious proposals that actually engage regions and countries all over the world. And thank you very much for your patience. Please introduce yourself, your question, and if you are asking specific panelists, please let us know. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. My name is Subhash. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Absa Bank.
Can you speak a little louder, please?
Sure, thank you. I think, first of all, thank you for mentioning the social vulnerability aspect, because what we are seeing practically is our most vulnerable customers are actually being impacted the most through things like phishing. So thank you for mentioning that. I think also we need to put on the table the conversation about the potential risks of quantum computing. So I know we spoke a lot about AI, but quantum computing also represents a significant risk, but also a significant opportunity, and I don't think enough is being talked about that.
Thank you. We can take more questions.
Hi, good morning, Václav Lukovic. Gilbert and Anna Maria, the points you made resonate with me very, very strongly. And both as a parent, as well as the 3 stages, Gilbert, which you mentioned. I believe it is extremely important also to put the education aspect on the table. We need to educate the consumers. Of course, we can regulate it. We need to safeguard the data. We need to have all of these. But if you think that many people still think AI is magic, right? LLM is not magic. So really educating both the young ones, but as well as the other users on how the systems actually work, what are the risks, and I think I see not enough of those initiatives really to educate all the users. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 2 more questions on the left. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. A very interesting panel. My name is Catherine Getao from Kenya. I was wondering if the word intelligence is very important, because we're moving towards a time which, as our colleague said, about agentic technology, which will begin to have its own hopes, desires, and motivation. Isn't it important to build morality into any intelligence so that our approaches to mitigating the risks are not always reactive or restrictive, but the technology itself has a sense of right and wrong, which is able to operate in unanticipated circumstances. My second area is we seem to find it very difficult to, and I think one of the panelists talked about it, to predict the effects of a technology in the long term. For example, the internet has completely changed the way that human beings consume and exchange information, and sometimes in ways that have been very difficult for society to deal with. So, how can we learn from the internet and social media experience about what we need to do with technologies like AI, or as the earlier question asked, like quantum computing? Do we have any way of anticipating where we're headed? Because I think this is where the problem lies, because where we're headed is coming more and more quickly than it has in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question.
Hello, I'm Stella Savides, a student at Stellenbosch University. Thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation around AI. I think it's a deep concern, particularly if I come from the academic world. In research, academics, plagiarism, AI, we're having huge issues at the moment, particularly at Stellenbosch with how we deal with AI. So I was just wondering, how do we mirror that with questions around the education of AI, educating people on AI, and then educating them without AI, or in a controlled AI environment. Particularly in many global south countries, we have very young populations, populations that are still being formed, literally, psychologically still being formed, but also still being formed in the ideas of the world. And with such a changing geopolitical world, that feels like a huge concern, particularly around research, which we use research in a lot of what we do as students, and it can be very difficult to tell when this is AI, when this is legitimate research. And yeah, just questions around the regulation and operational aspect of that, especially with Agentic AI, which are then able to create their own. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all 4 wonderful questions. We have actually somewhere had sub-questions, so we have 5 questions and less than 3 minutes. So this will be like for speakers to just grab whichever they want. And just to remind you, we had a question about quantum computing, about education, to make people understand that LLMs are no magic, but only a tool. We had questions about morality building AI, and how the social experience can be, social media experience can be adopted in AI. Did we get any wiser with the technology? And plagiarism in academia with AI and using AI wisely. And I see Anna raising her hand. Go ahead, Anna.
I would like to answer to the education question. And in fact, there's something where we humans are really, we can't compete with AI in terms of speed, we can't compete in terms of pattern recognition. Where we can compete is in something called cognitive flexibility. So we have humans, we have the ability to discern judgment, to look at things from different perspectives. And this is actually one of the controls that we have to build into these agentic AI systems, that we bring in human oversight, we bring in judgment where it's necessary. And the interesting thing is, you can teach cognitive flexibility through spatial intelligence. And spatial intelligence, by the way, is something that you develop between the ages 2 and 8. And in those ages, it's very important that we don't just hand out devices to our children, but that we teach them to, build Lego blocks, like really develop that spatial intelligence, because that helps us to build that cognitive flexibility muscle, which is so needed in this AI world. And that is what we need to teach. Like my research is all about cognitive resilience and digital mindfulness, and those are life skills we have to bring into the schools across campaigns in the country to teach the vulnerable, not just the kids, but also the elderly or whoever else is, actually everyone that's dealing with these tools, right?
Thank you, Anna.
I wanted to take up this question of ethics in technology that Catherine raised. I think this is a very, very important question. How do we bring morality into the use of technology? Learning from the internet usage example, the societal impact of these aspects, and how do we apply these lessons learned to technology? And one of my favorite examples is to talk about the HELA question, which was when an African woman was without her, American woman was without her consent, her cellular tissue was used to be duplicated in labs. And in fact, most cellular technology till today is based on HELA and without her permission. So I think that's a very important example of how ethics can be brought in, how permission, and it took 60 years for the government to apologize to this woman and her family. So I just mentioned that as an example of how technology far advances and outweighs the morality of situations.
Thank you very much for the wise words. Lata, it's been a wonderful conclusion to our conversation. Today, our time is up, so we'll have to close our panel. But thank you to all the panelists for insightful conversation. It's been a tremendous pleasure to be part of it. Thank you to the audience for shared commentary and your questions. And I wish you a wonderful rest of the days and panels in Cape Town. Thank you.